Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Judy Sims. I'm the founder of the Expansive Woman Project, where we help women build confidence and gain clarity so they can take charge of their success. Today, I am here with my lovely friend and Expansive Woman Project board member, Tiffany Chang. I'm sure you have heard at some point on your leadership journey that being a leader is like being the conductor of an orchestra. And I'm not sure anybody ever really thinks about what that actually means. And so today we have an actual, real orchestra conductor here to tell us what that actually means from her perspective. So I just want to do a quick intro of who Tiffany is because she's incredibly impressive and very busy. So we're extremely lucky to have her working with us today. Conductor Tiffany Chang has been recognized by the Solti Foundation US, the American Prize, and Opera America. Tiffany has conducted at the Lyric Opera of Chicago, Washington National Opera, the Dallas Opera, Portland Opera, Minnesota Opera, and Opera Columbus. She optimizes work culture for job satisfaction, promotes psychological safety for musicians, and leverages people-first leadership for artistic excellence. She also served as professor at Oberlin Conservatory, Berklee College of Music, Baldwin Wallace Conservatory of Performing Arts, and Boston University. Tiffany offers the blog Conductor as CEO and has been a published contributor for Routledge Press, and also most recently for the University of Pittsburgh leader to leader publication where she has recently written a piece called Three Leadership Perspectives for Enhancing the Orchestra Conductor Metaphor, which is why she's here today, because we want to talk about what are we talking about when we talk about what it means to be an orchestra conductor and how does that apply outside of the music world. So welcome, Tiffany, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
I'm so excited to be here, Judy. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Tiffany and I have known each other for like 2 or 3 years now. We met through some sort of forum group where we were, I can't even remember anymore. And we began our conversations about imposter syndrome and what that means and how it's experienced by people in the music world and how it's experienced outside of the arts. Tiffany, in that conversation, you told me the most astounding fact about job satisfaction for musicians in an orchestra. Can you tell us what that was?
Yeah, absolutely. So there was a study done in the 1990s about job satisfaction rates across different industries. And they did this study where they took 13, I think 13 different different jobs and ranked their job satisfaction rates. And orchestra musician uh, was one of the jobs that they looked at. And so they ranked job satisfaction from, one being the most satisfied, 13 being the least satisfied. Orchestra musicians was ranked number 9, which is rather low on the list. And they were actually ranked below job satisfaction rates of prison guards and flight attendants. And
Right.
that it was very shocking for me, but as a person who works in that industry, I can see where that comes from. And one of my main goals in my career and in my work is to flip the script on that and figure out, well, why is it that way, and what can we do to make that better?
And it is about leadership, right? Like job satisfaction of people is about leadership. And so it's so exciting that you decided, like, I'm taking this on and I'm going to be a better leader. And you've done so much work in this space. So it is just, I think it's easy to just kind of blame the person who's not satisfied rather than taking the responsibility for it yourself.
That is so true. Yeah, we blame the person who's been affected
Yeah.
by the
Yeah.
circumstances, right? Yeah, and I really do believe that, the leader is not the only person responsible, but they have a large impact on it. They have a huge impact and they have a huge responsibility for the conditions of that workspace, and that has become what I'm been very interested in.
And it is interesting because people think of orchestras as this like, highbrow, very civilized place where, everybody turns up and they're all very polite. So where do you think that lack of job satisfaction comes from?
That's a really interesting question because I think that the I can understand how the orchestra workplace may seem like this very special example of, oh, musicians get to do what they love for a living, and that's sort of a very coveted place in our society. And I think that musicians are just like any other the work that a musician does is just like the work that anybody else does in any other industry. We experience the same interpersonal challenges with our colleagues. We experience the same bureaucratic challenges of a top-down organization, and we have the same like HR challenges. We have the same challenges when it comes to advancement in one's career. So I think that we there is a way in which we ourselves, as musicians and the people who see us from the outside, kind of uh, fantasizes or kind of puts the job on a pedestal of like, oh, they get to do what they love for a living, so they don't have these troubles that we have. Or we as musicians can sometimes believe that illusion, that illusion of, oh, we are so lucky to get to do what we love for a living, so we don't get to feel bad
Yeah,
about our challenges, or we don't get to complain about our challenges, to use that word. And so I think that is sometimes why we don't try to make that better.
yeah. It's just even the notion that there's HR for orchestra is like, what? Of course there is. Of course there's a bureaucracy and there's money involved and there's all the things, but there's also, I think, the expectation of performance as well must be something that adds to the pressure.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is such a externally driven industry where the product there's such high expectations for the product that often we are so tunnel vision in making that product great, but we can, or in that process, we can neglect the other 95% of the work, which is the rehearsals, the way in which we think about our jobs outside of that very sort of superficial, externally facing product.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? I do what I love, and I still have my mornings where I wake up and I'm like, I don't want to do this today. I don't even
Yeah,
have a boss, right? Like,
absolutely.
I get
Yeah. Yeah. And
it.
I don't think that the goal it needs to be 100% satisfaction all the time. I heard someone say something about how um like I think like 20% is enough,
That's right.
for a fulfilling career. And I think that is such a disparity from what we think it needs to be. Yes.
Yeah, that's a boy, 20%. I have to think about that.
I might have to fact check myself on that, but I remember hearing that somewhere in some conversation.
Wow. Yeah, I can see it. Like if one day a week you're really, flowing through the job or two mornings or something, I can see how you get to the 20%. That makes sense. Yeah, those are probably the only if you're in a traditional business, those are the only times you're not in a meeting. So
Yeah.
that's when you enjoy your job. Okay, so I want to talk about the article that you wrote because it is so fascinating to me, and I was just instantly engrossed in it. And you begin it by talking about Beethoven's Eighth Symphony, which I had not been familiar with until you wrote about it, and that's when I like found it on iTunes and played it. And it is a really different piece. What is it about it that is in your words so game changing?
Yeah, well, I think that Beethoven's Eighth Symphony is often like the lesser known piece because it is surrounded by the Seventh and the Ninth Symphony. And the Seventh and Ninth Symphony are so groundbreaking in its own ways that we forget to look at the eighth through the same lens. And I think that the eighth is groundbreaking in ways in which the seventh and the ninth are not. In that the eighth is the shortest symphony that Beethoven wrote. It is only about like 24 minutes. It still has four movements. So I think that how much Beethoven packs in that short amount of time is in and of itself innovative. That he's able to say so much in a very short span of time, and that he pushes the boundaries on a lot of musical expressions that he has not done in the other symphonies until then. One of the examples that I give in the article is the use of extreme dynamic markings. So the use of three piano markings and three forte markings. So if piano is soft and the number of, one piano is soft, but there's three pianos, often in these extremely soft moments, and there are the three fortes. Forte is the loud moments, and so there are up to three fortes. And that's to my knowledge the first time that he's used the triple dynamic marking in his symphonies, and that is a sign to me that he's really trying to push the boundaries, really bringing that extreme to the table. And it's funny that he chose to do that in a short work, in a what is considered, a light piece. So I don't think the piece quite is light. I think that it is hefty because of that expanded dynamic range. And in this symphony, he also doesn't have a slow movement. He doesn't have a lyrical slow movement, and that is groundbreaking in and of itself. That he's defying the mold, the form that we expect of a symphony, and in lieu of a slow movement, the second movement, which is usually the slot for a slow movement, is sort of this parody movement, and he writes this sort of quirky movement that has sort of perpetual motion, and he's sort of making fun of the metronome. And so it's sort of ticking, 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 and then there's suddenly big bursts of this like metronome unwinding and breaking, and so it's very dramatic in that sense, and I think that it makes a lot of sense that symphony follows the Seventh Symphony, which expands form and expands instrumentation and expands expression in its own ways, and that it makes sense that is the next one. And then the one after that is the Ninth Symphony, which is sort of him going all out and using all the things and trying all the things. So it makes sense in that progression. But because it is the shortest symphony and it is considered often light, it is often overshadowed by the others.
It's that's such a perfect description of it. And you know what? I didn't realize it was only 24 minutes. When I found it on iTunes, I thought I only found one movement. I didn't real like I kept looking for more. So that's it. It's just the 24 minutes. If you haven't ever listened to it, I just give it a go. It is so different. And you can feel where the groundbreaking bits are, and the loud clanging moments are quite spectacular. And I didn't know he was making fun of the metronome, which is hilarious. He's a cheeky Beethoven.
Yeah, exactly.
When I read about your feelings about Beethoven's Eighth, it actually reminded me of Apollo 8, the eighth Apollo space mission, because it is overshadowed by Apollo 11, which was the moon landing, and Apollo 13, which is the one where there was an accident on board and they nearly didn't make it back. But to me, actually, Apollo 8 is the groundbreaking, more so than the moon landing. And the reason why is it was the first time any human being had ever left Earth's orbit. And so up until that point, everything had been we go up, we go around once or twice, and then we come down. And then for the earlier Apollo missions, it was we go up, we test all the stuff that we need to go to the moon, but then we come down again. So this was the first time any earthling being had left the Earth's orbit. Like it's hard to put into words like what the psychological impact of that must have been for those three men on that ship. One of whom was Jim Lovell, by the way, who was on Apollo 13, the commander of that. And one of the reasons he was so calm throughout the process is because there was a little mishap on Apollo 8 that they nearly didn't make it back as well. He entered some information in the computer wrong. And he fixed it. But that learning helped him in Apollo 13. So it also shows you in leadership how mistakes are good and necessary. But think about that moment they had when they fired off the second set of boosters that pulled them out of Earth's orbit. They did not know if they were ever going to come back. They didn't know if the slingshot around the moon to come back was going to work. They didn't know if the math was correct. I mean, there were lots of tests and everything to be sure it was correct, but still nobody really knew what was going to happen out in space, in outer space. And to me, it is the ultimate act of courage, groundbreaking, and overlooked. Nobody talks about Apollo 8. It's also the one where they took the beautiful picture, the Earth rising picture, so that the first time we saw the Earth as an actual sphere was taken on that mission as well. So yeah, it's if you're gonna do something and it's number 8, there's a good chance you're gonna be overlooked
Yeah.
if you're
Yeah,
breaking
that's so
stuff.
fascinating, Judy. Thank you for sharing that because I didn't know anything about Apollo 8 until you just shared this now. And I think that there's something special about the first time of anything,
Of
right?
anything.
And I think that it is, it's interesting that that mission is overshadowed because I think that we easily forget. We easily forget our even very recent achievements because there's always something else that we can strive for. And it's that like next thing that we strive for that gets all of our attention. And I think that is a lesson in reflecting back on and reviewing what we have achieved and celebrating that and finding the lessons in it, of course, but recognizing that, oh yeah, we did do that, and that is something that is that we did for the first time at that moment. And I think that it reminds me of what of where I can see how it relates to how Beethoven's Eighth maybe was also overshadowed because the next shiny thing came along and we really and it's so easy to forget that the impact that this other work has had because we're just giving our attention to that next shiny thing.
I am so guilty of that in my own career.
Same.
It
Yeah,
is,
same.
yeah, like it's just I did some really amazing workshops in the fall working with a huge international organization. It was very nerve-wracking. It took all kinds of preparation and then gone. And now I'm like, that did never happen, and I'm just focused on what's going to happen next. So you're right. It does. We should all focus on our eighth. Whatever our personal eighth is, we should remember that we did it because yeah, it'll help you through the rough times as well to know that you're capable of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, I want to talk about, I'm just pulling my questions over here. So I want to talk about your piece about the orchestra conductor myth. I heard it since, but I don't know, probably since the 90s I've heard this myth. It was fairly new to you though when you heard about it. Yes.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I had no
What?
idea. I had no idea, and I didn't make the connection until like after like 3 or 4 people have said that to me. Like the first time it was like, oh, okay, I can see how you as an individual maybe have used that metaphor. And then I heard it from another person, and I heard it from another person. I was like, oh, this is an industry-wide metaphor.
Yeah, which is ironic because nobody really understands what an orchestra conductor actually does, which is so it's like our impression of it. So what I love about this is you're telling us what you actually do and that the metaphor is true, but probably just not in the way we think it is.
Absolutely.
Perfect. So you talk about 3 leadership points. You talk about storytelling, you talk about listening, and you talk about musicians don't always follow the conductor, among many other things. But those are the 3 ones I want to focus on today because I think they apply so beautifully to what I call expansive leadership, like a leader who is fully showing up for their team. So can you tell me about storytelling? You were telling me earlier about how Beethoven was making fun of the metronome, but you don't always know what the actual story the conductor was trying to tell is.
Yeah, and I think that the conductor has a very special role because the story that often I, as a conductor, conduct is not my story. I didn't write the music, but I interpret someone else's music or someone else's story. So I think that it is a very special kind of leader that a conductor is, unless they wrote the story themselves. They wrote the music themselves. And so I think that my job is twofold, and like my job is to understand what the story is from the composer's perspective. So that takes a little bit of investigation, takes a little bit of understanding of what this person is trying to say, and sometimes they're very explicit about it, sometimes they're not, and you have to guess, or you have to kind of um, un uncover it in like a letter they wrote to a friend or in a program note that they wrote somewhere. So to me, the first step in being a storyteller in that sense is to investigate, to find clues that are in the piece of music, and that those clues often come in the form of, well, why do they choose to, asking the why questions of why do they choose to use this set of instruments? Why did I choose to use two flutes and not three flutes or not one flute, right? Often the counter, the imagining the what it is not helps me come up with a reason why it is the way that it is. So investigating the clues, why did they write, why did Beethoven write this short symphony as opposed to why is the eighth 24 minutes as opposed to 90 minutes? Why must it be this length? Why are the dynamics used? Why are the expression markings used? Why is the phrasing this way? So asking a bunch of why questions to uncover the intentions of the composer. And that is how I start to build the story that I want to tell. And I think what's really great about using this idea of storytelling is that every storyteller can have a different version, of the story, and that is actually okay. I think that it's so easy for us as musicians to latch on to the one right way to perform a piece of music, and of course there are some parameters that must be correct, like the tempo must be, if the composer specifies a tempo marking, then you want to be within, very close vicinity of that. You don't want to do it twice as fast or twice as slow. That would be against the composer's intentions. But so much of it is not explicit, and it gives the conductor who is interpreting a story that someone else wrote the license and the responsibility to tell their version of the story. And so for me, it's finding a version of the story to tell, and then because I work with people, I work with other musicians, trying to get them to buy into that story. And that is what rehearsal is for me, is how do I help the people in front of me understand the story that I find so interesting and fascinating and worth telling? And can I get them on board to tell that story? And can I get them to be excited? Can I get them to figure out, well, why is their part so important? And how does their part contribute to the larger story that we're trying to tell together?
Every leader listening to this recognizes what you're doing. Like everybody, like, okay, we need to have a big why. We need to have a vision. What are we trying to do here? What are we trying to create here? What is the purpose of your piece or of our business, right? Like, what are we trying to do? And then getting the buy-in. For you, if the flutes don't buy in, it's a problem. Or if percussion just isn't buying your story, it's not going to work. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's what it's tricky, because I don't make any sound as a conductor. I can't go and play the timpani for the percussionist. I can't go and play the flute for the flute player. I can only empower them. I can motivate them. I can, get that buy-in. I can be clear in what that vision is, but the actual doing of it is them. And I think recognizing that is really important, because then my job is not to make them do anything, but my job is to help them want to do that thing to the best of my ability.
That's leadership. Amazing. Amazing. And when they buy into the story, what happens? What is there a magic? What goes on when everybody's in there?
Yeah. Well, I often see it in their eyes first. Like
Wow.
I would share the thing that I think is so interesting about this piece, and then I would see them kind of perk up, and I would see interest. I would see energy in their eyes. That's when I know that they get it. And, and I can stop I can stop selling it.
Right,
And
right.
and then when they do get it, then it becomes easy because
Mm,
everyone is going toward the same goal. And I think that when there is a feeling of challenge, or when there's a feeling of stuckness, that's usually when the various members of the orchestra don't agree on where we're going, on what that story is. And and to be quite honest, that is actually the job of a conductor, is to be a centralized source of what is the story that we're telling. Because with an orchestra of 60 or 70, it's really hard to come to a consensus if we go through a sort of more, I guess, democratic process of trying to figure out, well, what does everyone think of this piece, and how should it go, and like why is the music written that way? I don't think any orchestra does that, honestly. I mean, I think ideally that would be, how a team functions, is everyone has their say. But in an orchestra, it's a little bit, it's impractical to approach it that way. And so the conductor's job is actually to be the centralized channel in which, okay, and the decision maker, which actually makes it hard for the conductor to be a leader in the sense of inviting opinions and folding in opinions, because there is bound to be different opinions about how things go. And so that's one of the challenges that I face as a leader who wants to grow into, who aspires to be someone who does invite and does take in suggestions and ideas from others, because I do believe that I'm not the only smart person in the room, and that if I leave everyone else's ideas on the table, I'm actually leaving value on the table. So I'm trying to figure out, I haven't figured it out yet. I'm trying to figure out, how do I make that happen in this very one-sided and top-down model of working, which has its, practical, which is necessary practically, but I'm looking for ways in which, within those boundaries, how do I have those
Classic
conversations?
dealing with complexity, right? Like it's a single piece might be too complex for any single person to actually have a complete grasp on it without it allowing other opinions. But then yeah, at some point you have to shut it down or it goes nowhere. It's like we have to choose the decision that or the direction we're going to go in, or it doesn't go anywhere. Yeah, classic leadership stuff. I love it. It's so fascinating. The parallels are absolutely solid. And yeah, yeah. All right,
Yeah,
I want to keep going, listening. So this is I think my favorite thing in the article. You talk about this thing called podium deafness. And I think that podium deafness is not just experienced by orchestra conductors, but by leaders everywhere. Can you tell us what podium deafness is?
yeah. So as a conductor, my preparation involves imagining the sound that I hope to elicit in my head. So I'm working on my internal hearing and what I hope to elicit from the orchestra. And then when I get in front of the orchestra, I have to listen to what is actually happening in the room. And I think part of my job as a conductor is to marry the two, to get the two, what's in my head and what's happening in the room, to be as similar as possible. And so what can happen is, sometimes because I'm so focused on what I hear in my head, I cannot hear what's actually happening in the room.
Amazing.
And that is podium deafness, is, for whatever reason, I'm so focused on what I'm hearing in my head, or I'm just so distracted because I'm thinking about myself. I'm thinking about, I'm being caught up in my own imposter syndrome, or I'm being caught up in my insecurities. And that shuts down my ears and I don't listen. So those are, I think, the two big reasons why we have podium deafness, is when we get on the podium, we're either so in ourselves that we're not aware, or that we're hearing what's in our head instead of what's actually happening.
And I think this happens in the business world all the time. I think, for people who have been in a meeting, especially a board meeting, all of us have seen a leader who isn't hearing the room, who has an
Mm,
idea in their head and they're assuming they're right, and that's the way they want it to go desperately, and it's not going that way. And it's almost like they develop now this tunnel vision where they just can't see what they don't want to know.
yeah,
I think we're seeing it happen in the world in a big way at this moment, a weird form of podium deafness. With podium deafness, it's the desire to get it right and for it to match your vision, and it's, I think in the business world, it's kind of like that, but it's also fear-based. It's this
yeah,
fear of I don't want to see the thing that I don't want to see. Right. And
right.
so it
Yeah.
gets ignored and creates problems over time. So it is, having read this, it's a term I'm going to start using in my leadership trainings and in my one-on-one coaching, is this notion of podium deafness, because I think it's absolutely fascinating. I've never heard of it before. And it's not just you who has it correct. It's like conductors in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone has it, and I think that it often comes from a place of not having our attention directed at in what's happening in the room.
Right.
It's
Right.
having the attention directed at happening in our head, whether it's the music or whether it's our self-talk or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so common. And I'm prone to it as well. It's a very, natural, normal thing, but just the awareness that this is a thing that can happen.
Yeah.
How does it change how you do your job, knowing that you can experience this?
It I have to really help myself stay in the moment and be listening. I have to remind myself that listening is my number one job, not like that is really my number one job, and reminding myself that I have to listen to what is happening in the room and direct my energy toward that. So I think for me it's a reminder of where I put my attention, and that sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't, because I'm still caught up in whatever is going on in my head. And but it is always a good reminder.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Presence. Being here in the moment, so important. Okay, so this last one makes me laugh, because everybody's been in in this position. Any leader has been in this position. Musicians don't always follow the conductor, but you are a team. But they're not like you are up there moving your arms, but that isn't necessarily. They're not even looking at you quite often. Correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
How does that
Yeah.
work?
Yeah, I think that this is one of the major misconceptions of a conductor as a metaphor, because I think that the idea of of musicians following conductor gives the conductor a lot of power, and it makes them seem very powerful. Like, oh, you just wait to stick around, and everyone has to follow you. But in
Right.
actual reality, that's not actually what happens. Musicians can choose to ignore a conductor. They could choose to not follow a conductor, and they could choose to not look at a conductor. And often they don't look at the conductor because they have to look at their music as well. So they only see the conductor from their periphery. So I like to think of an orchestra as a team, and whether that team consists of 10 people or 100 people, it's still a team. And when the team gets larger and larger, it just becomes more difficult to be a team
Yeah.
because of practicalities. And often that's when a conductor steps in. As the team members increase, the conductor is more use becomes more useful. And not just in the sense of keeping time, but also I think in a sense of not getting in the way, not getting in the way of the teamwork that is necessary in the room. And I think that's one of the reasons why musicians don't look at conductors, because sometimes looking at a conductor is counter productive. It's not helpful. And it can be that the conductor is trying to do something that is distracting to the musicians. It could be that the conductor is doing something that is simply not helpful, in that they're maybe not being very steady with the time, or they're not providing a sense of safety for the musicians. Um, as a leader, and so I think there are a lot of reasons why musicians don't follow the conductor. Um, but I use that as an entry point into this idea that the conductor is there to help the teamwork be easier, because teamwork gets harder as you add more people. And that is, to me, the primary sign of success for a conductor is, did I help this team do teamwork better? Or
You
or
need to
did I
take your
get in the way?
ego and like put it way over there because your
Yeah.
job is to get out of the way and
Yeah,
just
and I
team
think that's
show up.
so counterintuitive to what we think from what we see in the popular culture of what a conductor does.
Or what a
Because
leader
it's
does.
often those conductors who are authoritarians, who force the music on the musicians, they're the ones that the musicians don't follow, actually. They actively don't follow. And
There's like a little
but
rebellion
as an
going on.
audience member, you can't tell.
Right.
It's
Right.
hard to tell. It's hard to understand that dynamic because everyone's playing fine and the music sounds great and the conductor looks great. They look like that they're wielding a lot of power. But yeah. It's an interesting thing to think about because what we see is not often what's happening. And I think that goes for any field, like any way,
Yeah.
any leader and how their impact functions.
And you're an opera conductor. So now
I
you've got voices on top of everything. Um, is the orchestra in service of the singers, or is it more just a bigger team at that point? Like how do you balance those two things?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think that it is a bigger team, to use your words. I think it is a bigger team because there's just more layers to this story that we're telling. And the singers, their parts can't exist or won't make sense without the orchestra, and vice
Right,
versa.
right.
So I think that in the common understanding of things, yes, the orchestra is in service of the storytelling and the singers who tell the story. But it is really, I like what you said, that it's just a bigger team, because that's what it is. And my job, and that team now spans a lot of distance as
Right,
well. There's
right.
there's there's extra distance between the singer and the orchestra. It's harder to hear and it's harder to see. There's a lot of practical challenges that I have to help the
Yeah,
team navigate.
yeah.
And I often can't conduct the same way given those parameters. As much as
Yeah.
I want to conduct the same way because of
Right, right.
my intentions as an artist and as a musician, but there are practical, what the people need aspects that are involved there.
It really is a very different interpretation of conductor, because it is, the common notion is that they are in charge of everything and everybody follows their time and they tell everybody what to do. And this notion that it's actually this group of 90 people plus whoever's on stage, coming together to create something, as a team, to me makes it all the more beautiful. It makes it all the more miraculous, actually, that when you see that it's not about this single ego anymore, it's about all these artists coming together. Um, that does sound like a lovely place to work.
Yeah. And that is, I think, that the direction I hope that we will move
Yeah,
toward. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I can see what you're building. I can see what you're building. Okay, so those were the three big leadership questions I had for you. Now I got a few more specifics about your personal leadership style. So, how do you balance the need for precise execution with fostering creativity and individual expression? These are all artists. It's all a group of individual artists who all have their own way of doing things. How do you balance that?
Mhm. Well, I think the first thing is to recognize that, as what you said, they are individual artists and they have individual interests and needs and wants, and in doing their job. So I think, for me, it's balancing, having the clear vision, having the clear why, the purpose, and giving it to them, and and not micromanaging how they get there. I think that's what I strive for, because I think it's very easy for me to say, okay, well, here's where we're going, and here's how you're going to get there. Here are the steps in which you're going to get there. Here's how you play your instrument to get there. But that's not often what the people need. They just need to know where they're going, and then they can figure out how do they do that. And actually, that is where the creativity comes in, is them figuring out how am I going to get there. And like if I'm telling them everything, then there's less engagement, and there's less creativity involved on their part, and which leads to less satisfaction and fulfillment.
Yeah. So the
And
creativity, they need to have their own agency over what they're doing
yeah,
from a
so it's
creativity.
finding a way to inject that agency into a practical structure that where that's not often allowed, because it's more efficient for me, the conductor, to say, here's where we're going and here's how you do it. It's so much more efficient to do it, for that to be the process. And I like to think that we can't swing to the exact opposite of the pendulum, but we can find a middle point
Right.
where
Right.
there is some agency, and where I can say, here's what is our goal, clearly defined, and here are the high standards that I have, and to believe that they can achieve it on their own, and that they will come to me for help if they need help, and to trust that like they would actually want to go toward that goal as well.
Trust. That's it, right? It's them trusting you and you trusting them.
Yeah,
That
and that's so hard in a situation where, as a conductor, I'm expected to 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 give all of that value.
yeah, yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. Um, okay. So you did say before that there are interpersonal issues sometimes between musicians and conductors and musicians between each others and the up and down. Um, how do you navigate when there's significant disagreement either between them or between you and them? How do you pull everybody together?
Yeah, that is always tricky, because I think that musicians are people, and when people work together, they're bound to be interpersonal challenges. And I think it's, it all when it all comes down to it, it's rarely about the music. It's more about the feelings and the ways in which what they need. And so my strategy always is, if I'm brave enough, is to ask questions to understand more of about the situation, like whether it's a conflict between me and someone else, or whether it's a conflict between people that I the people in the group that I work with. And and to ask questions to uncover what is the real challenge, what's the real issue here. It's really not about the music often, because and also just to recognize that people are entitled to have their own opinions about the music, that does not make someone less right or less wrong to
Yeah.
have these opinions. And so I think a lot of it is validating it, when there are differences in opinion, validating those different opinions and finding a way to acknowledge that, and then say, well, here's the path forward.
You are such a great leader. You just everything the first thing I teach leadership students to do when they're having difficulty with a team member is to say, what's the real challenge for you here? Because we assume we think we know what it is,
Right.
right? We don't know anything.
Yeah,
And
right.
then validating. Yes, I hear you. You are validated. You are worthy. Your opinion matters, even if I go in a different direction.
Uh,
But I hear you and I see you and I see your contribution is such a big deal. Um, oh, there was
yeah,
somewhere else.
that's so hard. That is so hard.
Yeah.
Context of, I think in the orchestra context is so hard, because we have been conditioned to believe, or at least the orchestra musicians, often through their school and training, have been conditioned to believe that their opinions are secondary to the conductor's opinions.
Right,
And
right,
so the conductor's opinion is always the right one. And so the conductor is always the one who has to have the answers,
right.
who has to make that decision. And often what that leads to is uh is stopping to think creatively.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's just like, well, what is the point of me having an opinion if the conductor's just going to tell me what they want?
Right. They feel powerless and invalidated, and therefore job satisfaction drops, right? Like
Yeah,
it's yeah.
I do believe that that is one of the reasons why job satisfaction can be lower than ideal, because there's sort of this practiced not having an opinion.
I like to when coaching groups of people is allow them to put stuff on a whiteboard anonymously about how they're feeling that day. So you get this big whiteboard of all these emotions that are going on, and some people are excited, and some people are anxious, and some people are sad, and some people are just dreading something, and everybody's got their thing. And I like to show it to them and say, look at this. We all have our stuff, and we bring it to work, and we still try to make something happen anyway. Right?
Right.
Like we all have
Yeah.
grief. We all have insecurities. We all have broken hearts. We all have things that we bring. We have triggers from childhood. We have, just stuff that we bring to work. And here it all is. And somebody can trigger us at any moment with that. And yet here we all are trying to work toward a common goal. And I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful that we do that. And sure, some people are poisonous and whatever, but for the most part, and what's interesting about you is you're trying to do it with 100 people all at once. Like usually when we show up at work, they're like they're kind of dispersed. We're trying to bring everybody together with their stuff and say, now
Uh,
let's do this.
yeah.
Is a monumental leadership challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so powerful when you create space for people to feel seen for their challenges or their ideas. And that's one of the things that I'm still trying to figure out how to implement that in the context of a rehearsal. And I do have to say that sometimes when I do try things, that is not always met with welcoming arms, because it is so different than how they are used to being engaged with by a conductor. And so I will say that sometimes the conflicts that I've experienced come from the musicians not wanting what I want, what I have to give them, that agency, right? And then that is a
Right.
challenge.
Just tell me what to
That
do. Yeah,
that
yeah.
is because they want me to just tell them what to do. Like if I ask them, what is your opinion about XYZ, their response is not like, oh, I get to have an opinion. Their response often is, oh, you don't have an opinion. So you're weak and you don't know what you're
Oh,
talking about. And why should I? It's not my job to have an opinion about the music. It's your job to have an opinion about the music. So why don't you have an opinion? Well, it's not that I don't have an opinion, it's that I'm curious about their opinion, but that is such a leap of faith that they have to. I mean, and I realize that is there's safety involved. There's the maybe a lack of safety that they feel, so that they don't feel comfortable having an opinion, which makes sense.
yeah, yeah. And I think too, it probably the world of music probably attracts some perfectionists or people with perfectionist tendencies. And sometimes those people don't like having choice. They just like being told what to do so they can just get it
Yeah,
perfect and move on.
right, exactly. Yeah. Or that also means that they don't have the responsibility.
Right.
They don't hold the responsibility when it goes wrong or when it doesn't work.
Wow. Of course, of
Yeah.
course. So yeah, your approach for some people can feel a little bit threatening until that trust is built.
So threatening. Yeah. I mean, in the field, out in the field, I feel like that it is more threatening than not.
Wow. Wow. Okay. I think that's an important lesson for a lot of people who want to do things differently in the workplace as well. That initially it can feel threatening until the trust is there and you're able to get more out of them and have them step into their agency, step into what I would call their expansiveness, where they're fully showing up with their all their creativity and all their talents as well. Amazing. So I'm skipping question 3, Tiffany. I can see you're looking at them as well. Um, What role does empathy play? Kind of getting to that where you are dealing with perfectionists or people who have had years and years and years of training, and it's deeply important to them. Like how does empathy come into your work?
I think it comes down to me wanting to help them do their best work and then understanding all of them and what they need, what they want in order for me to achieve that goal. Because sometimes what I want for them or what I have to give them is not helpful for them. And
Right,
that's the kind of empathy that I've had to learn and I'm still learning. Is sometimes I really want to give them something, but I don't ask them, is that actually what they want or need? And so and then when they don't want the thing I'm trying to give them, then I get mad and then I I have all these thoughts about whatever it is that I think about. But when I just didn't really have empathy for them to begin with. So I think it's like really defining what is the empathy that I want to have in this
right,
context.
right,
And it's an empathy of it. I think it's an awareness and an acceptance that they can want different things than what I have to give them. And then to find a compromise. It's like, well, if they really want that, but I have this, then how do I adjust what I have to give them? Or how do I get them closer to wanting this thing that I have to give them? So in a way, it is I think that uh the kind of empathy that I need to have is it depends on the situation.
yeah, right. Yeah. Um, there's a parallel there. There's lots of parallels actually between your work and my work as a coach. And so yeah, early in my career, I was kind of like, I know what you need, right? Like, let me help you, damn it, get out of my way, right? Like, let me get in there and do what needs to be done. And now it's more of a place from curiosity. I'm just kind of curious about what they think they need and what they want. And then yeah, sometimes you can guide them in a different direction. But that's more of a collaboration between the two of you at that point instead of just a heavy-handed, let me help you.
Yeah, I resonate with that, and I do think that as I have grown as a leader, my approach has become more of a coaching approach.
Yeah.
And recognizing that they don't need to be told what to do. They could be, given a perspective that I have that may influence how they think about things, but it's really up to them to decide how to solve or what the problems are and how to solve the problems. And and I find that where I struggle with that is I have this coaching approach, but they didn't sign up for coaching. They signed up to they sign up to play in an orchestra, right? And so it's that, where I could imagine that, even though you in your position of coaching can know what people want and then realize that's not what they want, but they still sign up for coaching or
Right.
for
Yeah. Yeah.
reason, right? And so where I find challenging is, well, most of the time I find that what I have to give and how I have to give it is not what my musicians want. So how do I still stay true and authentic to my approach? Because I really do believe that it is the way forward. How do I stay true to that while recognizing that that's not what my people perhaps need and want right now?
You're an eighth.
Yeah.
You are groundbreaking. You are breaking new ground in how to be a conductor. And it's taking people a while to come along with you on the ride. Um, but yeah, you're an eighth. Hopefully you're not overlooked. But I think that you are changing the rules in a way that is phenomenal and will probably, change how orchestras are led into the future. But for now, it's just that clash of expectations between what they want and what you're able to give. And that by being empathetic, by involving them in the process, you're asking more of them. than they've been asked of in the past.
Mhm.
Where before it's just like go be perfect and do what I say, and they're like used to that. But you're opening up a space in a really interesting way. But I bet it shows up in the music when you get it right.
I like to think so. And it's
Yeah.
a feeling also. I think it's a feeling. And so, it's intangible. And I think that's why it's hard.
Yes. Yeah, but so much of leadership is,
Mhm.
right? It just
Uh,
is intangible.
yeah.
Okay. I'm skipping a few more. I'm just going to trick you here.
Sure.
Well, I do want to kind of build on that. So how do you measure success as a conductor, like just beyond the technical proficiency of the performance? What has you coming off or out of the pit and being like, okay, that went well.
Yeah. I've searched for this answer for like all of my life because I'm as I try to improve myself, I'm always asking the question, well, how do I define success for myself?
Right.
And where I currently am, I think that like I would be proud of my work if the music makes sense from a storytelling standpoint. Like, does the story make sense?
Ooh.
It's not enough if the people just play the right notes at the right time. That's not really enough for me. And while that may be enough for other people, that's not enough for me. And like, what I need to feel is, oh, this story has an arc. This story has a journey, and the intentions of the composer were honored in my version of the storytelling, and that the musical decisions that I made along the way were actually realized to serve that purpose. So I think
Yeah.
that's one way in which I would be proud. And then the second way in which I would be proud is if I feel like that I've created comfort and safety for the musicians to do their best work. And that is, as we said, intangible, but I really do feel like that musicians are my customers. They are the ones that I do my work for. And so I want, at the end of the day, for them to have made progress. I want them to feel like and see that they've made progress. So that's one of the ways in which I measure my success. My success is, did they make progress and have a positive growth experience, which hopefully will lead them to be more satisfied and fulfilled.
What's the feedback you've had from musicians who have bought into what you're trying to do? How are they experiencing it?
Yeah, I think it's positive. And I do think that people do feel, and it may not always come out. I think that musicians don't always make the connection of, why they feel more empowered or why they feel better or why they feel, but I do think that one of the things that people have said to me for ages is, oh, time goes by so fast in rehearsals. It feels like that time goes by so fast. And I don't think that's because like I am some like magician that makes time go faster, but I think that it's because I provide a workplace and environment where people are engaged. And so when you're in flow state, time seems to go by faster. And that's not, that's just how and that has been a comment that's made to me like very early in my career. And I spent like all of my career trying to understand that, like, why is it that way that people feel that way. And people have said that they felt safe to be creative. People have said that they feel like that they can be their best selves, that their best selves do come, their best playing does come out. And so I take those comments as signs of success. But for me, it is really all about their experience. Like, can I design an experience where they walk away feeling uplifted, satisfied, and accomplished?
I think you're an exceptional leader. I think you are what I write about when I write about an expansive leader. It's everything you have just said. And it takes so much courage and it is so much harder. And it takes so much more of you to do it. But if you can fulfill the mission, if you can tell the story, and if everybody can feel safe and their best creative self while you're doing it, I can't imagine the feeling that must produce for you as well. It must be amazing.
Yeah, it makes me feel great when I
Yeah.
feel that I made other people feel great.
Yeah, yeah,
And
and
I
it's addictive.
recognize that that is a marker of success for me.
Yeah, yeah, that's powerful. All right, one last question. Um, so so many people want to go into the creative field and then they don't, because it's scary. It's all the things you just talked about, plus the, financial insecurity and all of the stuff that comes along with it. What is your advice to somebody who is aspiring to, one, go into the creative space, but two, be a leader in the creative space?
Yeah, it is a tough space to be in. I have to say that first. It is so hard. Um, and when it is such a hard space, I think that one of the things that is important is to build our resilience. And I think resilience comes from purpose.
Oh, yeah.
And that purpose, so I would suggest first gaining clarity on what that purpose is. Like, what is the value that you as an individual bring to the table, to the profession? And with that clarity, you can then look for the people who want that thing that you have to give. And sometimes they need a little bit of convincing or a lot of convincing. But there are people who don't need any convincing. And and so like looking for those people with the thing that you have to, with the clarity of what you have to give, looking for those people and then just like showing up and doing your best to give that thing to them and staying on that course. I think that is the advice I'm giving myself every day
Yeah.
to stay resilient because it is very hard to be in the space. And I really appreciate, Judy, your resonating with it and also recognizing that maybe what I'm doing is on the forefront. And so therefore there's just so much there can feel like a lot of resistance and challenge in breaking that ground. And that's just part of the deal. But that deal requires a lot of resilience. And
Yeah.
I find myself needing that reserve of resilience like all the time, every day.
But the purpose pulls you, right? As opposed to pushing you. Like it pulls
Yeah,
you
yeah,
forward. Yeah, I get that. I get that. Yeah, I think we are entering a time where all of us are going to need a lot more resilience. It is an undervalued life skill. When I have a lovely coaching friend named Teresa Smith who says that first comes courage, then comes confidence. That none of so many clients come and the first thing they say is I want to feel more confident at work. It's like, okay, what are you willing to do to get there? Right?
yeah,
Like, what are you, and that's resilience, right? It's like, what are you, how far out there are you willing to put yourself, and how much are you willing to scare yourself to get the confidence that you want? And what I see in you is an increasingly confident leader, even in the 3 years I've known you. Your confidence has really gone through the roof. Not that I have worked with you, but just in our conversations that we have, I see how solid you are in what you're doing, and the clarity that you have in this approach, even though it's not always easy, but that it is what you were meant to be doing.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you for saying that.
Oh, it's amazing. Tiffany, I cannot thank you enough for being here with me today. I'm so excited about getting this up on the website and to share it with all my clients as well, because I think it's just an extraordinary example of leadership, and in a context that is so far removed from what most people are in every day, that I think they'll find it inspiring because it is so different and because it's causing them to think about leadership in such a different way. Can you tell me what's next for you? Where can people find you? Is there something you'd like to promote while you're here that we could tell people about?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I, I am now more of a freelance conductor, so I have various gigs in the future in sort of different parts of the country, and but and that often comes with a lack of uh regularity.
Yep.
But what I do have regularity for is that I write a blog every week, and that blog is called Conductor as CEO, where I write about leadership ideas that I'm curious about, and for people who want to become better leaders. So that is the place where I would point your folks is to the blog, Conductor as CEO, conductorsceo.com is the blog. And
I will put a link
I,
to it below.
yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, and that's where I try to show up every week.
I
And
love
that's where I can control the consistency of when I can show up. Whereas in my gig work, I can't really control that.
I know that feeling too. I know the feeling at the beginning of the year, like I have no idea what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the year. It's a
But
very,
things always come up
yeah,
invariably.
they
I,
do.
I I just don't know
Yeah,
often,
yeah.
when I'm being asked. But so I have found ways in which to insert a little bit of agency and control into my life. And the blog is one of those things, and my
Huge.
content on social media is one of those things where okay, I can control how I show up here. So I will.
And that's what I do too. It's like if you want to have a great independent career, it is going to take some tolerance of uncertainty.
Yes.
That is it for sure. First courage, then confidence. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Tiffany. By the way, if those of you watching want to see Tiffany at work, you can Google her. You will see various YouTube videos and things of her working. What I love, I come from the dance world, is Tiffany, you are a dancer when you do your work. I can see how connected you are to the music and how lovely it is to watch you do your thing. So please look for her. Follow her on LinkedIn because she has an amazing LinkedIn feed where she's putting up videos about leadership and the blog, which I will link below. Thank you. Thank you. This has been an extraordinary experience for me.
And this has been really affirming and engaging and just inspiring to have this conversation. And I so appreciate the space that you've created for it.